AITA for choosing my best friend over my fiancé and losing them both in the process? Loyalty used to seem simple to me, like a compass that always pointed true north. But compasses don't work when the magnets start pulling in opposite directions, and I learned too late that love and loyalty can tear you in half. The first time I met Daniel and Emily in the same room, I remember thinking how strange it felt to have the two most important people in my life sitting across from each other. Daniel, my fiancé, calm, thoughtful, careful with words. Emily, my best friend since college, sharp, funny, endlessly curious. They couldn't have been more different, but somehow, they balanced me. He grounded me. She reminded me who I was before I learned to hide my rough edges. For a while, I thought having them both meant I'd done something right in life. That I'd built a small universe of people who loved me for different reasons and somehow made it all fit. But looking back, I think it was always doomed to crack, too much gravity in one orbit. It started small. Comments that lingered too long in the air. Glances between them that I tried not to notice. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia, the natural tension of bringing two worlds together. Emily could be intense, Daniel could be reserved. It made sense that they'd need time to adjust. The first real crack came during a dinner at our apartment. I'd stepped into the kitchen to pour wine, and when I came back, the two of them were laughing about something, an inside joke I didn't recognize. It was small, harmless even, but something in the sound of their laughter made my skin prickle. It was the way she leaned slightly toward him, the way he looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. I told myself I was imagining it, that they were just becoming friends. And for a while, I believed that. Or wanted to. But the feeling grew. Little things, messages between them that I wasn't copied on, plans they made without mentioning, moments where I felt like the outsider in my own relationship. I confronted her once, half-jokingly. "Careful," I said, "you'll make me jealous." She smiled and said, "Don't worry, he's yours." I laughed, but something in her tone felt off, too careful, too practiced. When I told Daniel about it later, he just shrugged. "You're overthinking," he said. "You know she means well." He kissed my forehead, and I wanted to believe him. I wanted to keep the peace. For months, I lived in denial. I convinced myself it was fine, that what I was feeling was insecurity, not instinct. I told myself real adults don't get jealous of their friends. That trust means letting people be close to the ones you love. Then one evening, Emily called me, her voice low and strange. "Can I come over?" she asked. "I need to talk." She arrived 20 minutes later, pale and tense. She didn't sit down. She just stood in the doorway, eyes darting around the room like she was looking for escape routes. "There's something I have to tell you," she said. Her voice cracked. "You deserve to hear it from me." My stomach turned cold. I didn't ask what she meant. I think I already knew. But the words she said next weren't what I expected. She didn't confess an affair. She didn't say she'd slept with him. She said, "Daniel kissed me." I didn't want it to happen. But it did. For a long time, I couldn't speak. The room seemed to tilt. I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming, the faint clink of her bracelet as she wiped her eyes. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, how, when, why, but all that came out was, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I couldn't live with it," she whispered. "Because I love you." And I believed her. I believed every word. Until Daniel came home an hour later and told me a completely different story. He said she'd kissed him. That she'd misread things, that he'd pulled away immediately. That she'd apologized. That she was drunk. 2 stories. 2 people I loved more than anyone else in the world. One of them lying. I spent that night on the couch, the 2 of them in separate corners of my mind, each face flickering like a coin spinning midair. Heads or tails, truth or betrayal, I couldn't tell which side would land up. The next morning, Emily texted, "I'm sorry. Please believe me." Daniel said nothing. And I realized that whatever truth existed between them had already destroyed the truth I had with both. The week after that night stretched on like an open wound. Every sound in the apartment felt too sharp, the faucet dripping, the scrape of chairs on tile, the faint buzz of my phone lighting up with messages I couldn't bear to open. I stopped eating. Stopped sleeping. I kept replaying both of their versions in my head, trying to stitch together something that resembled sense. Daniel swore it had been nothing, a moment of confusion, an accident, a misunderstanding. His voice was steady, almost gentle, the way you talk to someone on the edge. "You know me," he said. "You know I'd never do that." And he was right, I didn't know him. Or at least, I thought I did. Emily's story never changed. She said he'd kissed her while driving her home after a party. That he'd said something about how things would be easier if he'd met her first. That she'd pulled away immediately and told him to forget it. That she'd spent weeks deciding whether to tell me because she didn't want to ruin what I had. Her honesty was messy, unpolished, full of pauses, contradictions, emotion. It sounded human. Maybe too human. I wanted to believe her. I also wanted to believe him. The mind does strange gymnastics when it's trying to protect the heart. Every time I started to doubt her, I remembered how she'd held my hand through my mother's funeral. Every time I started to doubt him, I remembered how gently he'd loved me through my worst years. The truth felt less like a line between them and more like a fog I kept walking into. I tried to talk to them separately again, to hear what my instincts couldn't. Emily's guilt was raw, her eyes red, her hands restless, her words stumbling over themselves. Daniel's defense was calm, measured, almost rehearsed. He never got angry, never raised his voice, never looked away. It was the stillness of someone either completely innocent or utterly sure of his ability to be forgiven. At night, when I lay beside him in bed, I watched his breathing, waiting for some involuntary twitch or dream word to betray him. It never came. He slept like a man unbothered by ghosts. The silence between us grew heavier. We still lived together, still moved through the motions of our shared life, work, chores, dinners, but everything was hollow now. He would kiss my temple before leaving in the morning, and I would pretend not to flinch. I avoided Emily. Her texts piled up unread. I told myself I needed space, but what I really needed was time to decide whose version of reality to destroy. Because whichever one I chose, someone would lose everything. Maybe both of us would. One afternoon, I left work early and drove to the park near Emily's apartment. I sat there in my car, watching the rain smear the windshield, rehearsing what I'd say if I saw her. But when she stepped out of her building, her face caught in the gray light, something inside me broke. She looked smaller than I remembered, fragile in a way I'd never seen her before. I almost called out, but I didn't. I just sat there, hidden behind the rain, and let her walk away. That night, Daniel cooked dinner like nothing had happened: salmon, roasted vegetables, a glass of white wine. The ordinariness of it made me want to scream. When he asked how my day was, I said fine. He smiled, reached across the table, touched my hand. I felt nothing but the weight of his ring pressing against my skin. Later, while he was in the shower, I looked through his phone. I'd never done it before. I told myself I was just confirming what I already believed, that there was nothing to find. But part of me knew I was hoping to find something, anything, that would make the choice easier. There were no messages from her. No calls. No signs. Just a handful of old photos, group pictures, dinners, the kind of memories that used to make me happy and now felt poisoned. I almost laughed at how clean it all was. When he came out, I was sitting on the bed holding his phone. He froze, then sighed. "You're still doing this," he said quietly. "Still doubting me." "I just needed to know," I whispered. He sat beside me, his voice soft. "You already do. You're just afraid of what it means." And he was right. I was afraid. Because no matter how many times I turned it over, I couldn't find a version of this story where I didn't lose someone I loved. A week later, Emily sent me a letter. Handwritten. It arrived folded twice, in an envelope that smelled faintly of her perfume. There were only 3 lines inside. "I'm leaving town for a while. I'm sorry for everything. Please remember I never lied to you." I read it once, then burned it over the kitchen sink. The smoke smelled like cheap paper and endings. Daniel held me that night while I cried, and I let him, though I didn't know whether I was mourning her, us, or the person I'd been before any of this. I told myself I'd chosen him, that loyalty meant staying. But deep down, I knew the choice wasn't really about loyalty. It was about fear. For a while, life pretended to mend itself. Emily's absence made it easier to breathe. The apartment felt lighter, cleaner, as if removing one person had purified the air. Daniel and I moved through days that looked normal from the outside: work, dinners, movies we didn't finish. Sometimes I even caught myself laughing. I mistook that for healing. But healing doesn't begin where the pain stops, it begins where the silence starts to feel wrong. 3 months passed. Her name stopped appearing in conversations. Friends adjusted to her absence with polite curiosity that faded quickly. It's strange how easily the world closes over people when they leave, like water around a stone that's been pulled out. One afternoon, Daniel came home with flowers. For no reason, he said, smiling. The gesture was perfect, practiced. I arranged them in a vase and watched the stems cloud the water. Something inside me stayed still. I thought about her constantly. Not in anger, more like hunger for something unfinished. I'd dream about us three together again, laughing at some forgotten joke, and wake with tears already drying on my face. In those dreams, the betrayal never happened. We were all still whole. Then, one day in early spring, an email arrived. The sender was a name I didn't recognize, but the subject line froze me: for closure. Inside was a single paragraph. It wasn't from her. It was from a mutual friend who'd recently run into her in another city. She'd been working at a nonprofit, apparently happy, but had asked the friend to pass something along to me if they ever crossed paths. A file was attached, a screenshot of an old text conversation. The message was from Daniel. Sent the night of the party. You make me question everything. Don't tell her. Please. There was no context beyond that. No replies. Just those 2 lines, time-stamped at 1:04 a.m., the night everything changed. For a long time I couldn't breathe. The world tilted back into the shape it should have had all along. The denial I'd built, brick by careful brick, came down in silence. That evening I made dinner like usual. I listened to him talk about his day. I smiled in the right places. I waited until the dishes were done, until the house smelled faintly of soap and garlic, before I said, quietly, I heard from Emily. He froze. Oh, she's doing well, I said. She sent me something. His face didn't move, but his hands tightened around the edge of the counter. What kind of something? I didn't answer. I just looked at him. The stillness stretched too long, and then I saw it, the flicker of guilt that passes through even the best liars when they realize the game is over. A small tremor in the mask. That was all I needed. He didn't confess. He didn't have to. The silence was enough. That night, I slept in the guest room. He didn't try to stop me. In the morning, the flowers were gone. So was he. For weeks after, I felt nothing but a hollow calm. I told no one. I went to work, came home, made tea. The apartment seemed to shrink, its corners echoing with the absence of 2 people I had once loved in completely different ways. It should have felt lonely, but mostly it felt honest. The air was finally matching the truth. Then one night, a letter slid under my door. His handwriting. I didn't open it at first. I left it there until morning, until curiosity outweighed exhaustion. It wasn't an apology. It was an explanation. You were right about her. I kissed her. I don't know why. Maybe because she saw parts of me you didn't. Maybe because she reminded me of who I was before I met you. But I never stopped loving you. I thought if I buried it, it would go away. I was wrong. I'm sorry I made you choose. There was no signature. Just his name typed at the bottom like a resignation. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside Emily's old photo, the one I hadn't been able to throw away. I looked at them side by side, realizing that together they told a single story, each one half of the truth I'd spent months running from. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears came later, quietly, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon when a song came on the radio, one we used to play at dinner. I had to pull over on the side of the road and just sit there, hands gripping the wheel, trying to remember what it had felt like to be innocent. After I read his letter, nothing exploded. No rage, no shouting, no grand gesture of closure. Just a long, slow quiet that filled the rooms like fog. People imagine that discovering the truth is a moment of clarity, but it isn't. It's disorientation. You spend so long fighting to see the shape of the lie that when the light finally hits, everything looks unfamiliar. I started cleaning. It felt like the only thing left that I could control. I scrubbed the kitchen tiles until my hands ached, boxed up the dishes we'd picked together, threw out the wilted herbs on the windowsill. Every object had a memory attached to it, and every memory had an echo of both of them. I wanted blankness, empty drawers, bare shelves, clean air. He called once. I didn't answer. Then he emailed to say he'd moved out of the city, that he'd left the apartment lease in my name, that he'd respect my silence. The message was polite, precise, like a business transaction between strangers. I stared at it until the words blurred. Part of me wanted him to beg, to fight, to make it hurt enough to justify how much it already did. Instead, he gave me peace, and peace felt unbearable. Weeks passed. I began walking every evening just before sunset, when the light turned everything gold and forgiving. The city looked softer at that hour, like it was trying to apologize for something. I told myself I was healing, but mostly I was rehearsing normalcy. The truth lived under my skin like a splinter, small, invisible, impossible to remove. One night I found myself near the cafe where Emily and I used to meet on Sundays. I hadn't gone back since she left. The same barista was still there, the same chipped mug on the counter, the same old indie song looping faintly from the speakers. I sat at our usual table, ordered her favorite drink out of habit, and stared at the empty chair across from me. The grief that came wasn't sharp anymore. It was slow and thick, like honey left too long in the jar. When I got home, I opened a blank email. I typed her name into the address line and waited for the cursor to blink itself into courage. I wrote a few words I know now. I'm sorry it took this long. Then I deleted them. She deserved more than my late understanding. She also deserved not to have to carry it anymore. So I closed the laptop and whispered it into the air instead, hoping it would reach her somehow. Days became weeks, weeks became months. People stopped asking about Daniel. Friends invited me out, and I started saying yes. I learned to fill my days with new noises, the hiss of an espresso machine, the rhythm of a running track, the scratch of pen on paper. I learned that solitude wasn't punishment, it was recovery. Sometimes, though, the memories came back like weather. I'd catch a scent of his cologne in a crowd or hear her laugh in someone else's mouth, and the ground would shift for a heartbeat. But the panic faded faster each time. Guilt became background noise, steady but bearable. I stopped needing to assign blame. What they'd done wasn't simple betrayal, it was human weakness colliding with human need. And I had been part of it, too, my silence, my blindness, my unwillingness to see what love had turned into. By late autumn, I'd moved into a smaller apartment with white walls and too much light. The first night there, I unpacked a single box, a photo of me alone at the coast, taken years before either of them existed in my life. I put it on the shelf and realized I was looking at someone I could become again, not the same, but close enough to start over. I made tea, sat on the floor, and listened to the wind outside. It sounded like ocean waves, or maybe applause. I couldn't tell the difference anymore, but it didn't matter. For the first time in months, I didn't need to decide. A year has passed since everything fell apart. Sometimes I still wake in the middle of the night, unsure whose apartment I'm in, whose life I'm living. Then I see the faint light from the street spilling across the white walls, the absence of anyone else's breathing, and I remember, this is mine now. Life didn't rebuild itself all at once. It crept back in small, ordinary ways, learning the names of the neighbors, finding a favorite corner in the coffee shop downstairs, realizing one morning that I'd gone an entire day without thinking of either of them. Healing, I've learned, doesn't announce itself, it just quietly replaces pain with habit. I never heard from Daniel again. I sometimes imagine him somewhere colder, maybe in a new apartment with unscuffed floors, telling someone new that he once loved a woman who couldn't forgive him. I don't hate him for it. Hate would mean he still takes up space inside me, and I've worked too hard to reclaim that space. Now he's just a closed door I no longer feel the urge to open. As for Emily, she wrote once. A short email that began with, "I hope this doesn't reopen anything," and ended with, "I miss the way we used to laugh." She said she was happy, that she'd met someone kind, that she'd learned to stop apologizing for surviving. I read it twice, then 3 times, before replying with a single line, "I'm glad you're okay." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a start. She didn't write back, and she didn't need to. Some friendships end not because love disappears, but because it finally stops hurting. I still keep his letter and her photo in the same drawer. Not as reminders of betrayal, but as proof that truth doesn't always have villains. Sometimes it just is people who tried their best and failed each other anyway. There are nights when I walk by the river and watch the lights ripple on the surface. The water never stays still. It carries everything forward, piece by piece, until even the reflections change shape. I think that's what forgiveness really is, not erasing the past, just learning how to let it move. People talk about closure like it's an ending, but it isn't. It's maintenance. It's waking up each morning and deciding not to reopen the wound. It's choosing silence when anger would be easier, kindness when pride still stings. It's realizing that loyalty doesn't always mean staying, it sometimes means leaving before the love turns cruel. On the anniversary of the breakup, I lit a candle for no reason other than to mark the time. The flame flickered against the glass, soft and steady. I sat beside it, sipping tea, and thought about the person I used to be, the one who believed you could love two people without breaking something sacred in yourself. I wanted to tell that version of me that heartbreak isn't failure, it's proof that we're capable of depth. Outside, the city hummed, alive and indifferent. The world kept going, as it always does, and I realized so had I. My life isn't dramatic now. It's quiet. I work, I read, I water the small plant on my windowsill that somehow refuses to die. Some days that feels like redemption. Every once in a while, I catch myself wondering what would have happened if I'd chosen differently, if I'd believed her first, if I'd walked away sooner. But I've learned that what if is just another form of grief pretending to be curiosity. The truth is, all three of us chose what we could live with, and this peace, imperfect and fragile, is what remains of those choices. I blow out the candle before bed. The smoke curls upward, vanishing into the dark. For the first time, it doesn't feel like loss. It feels like release.